One of the most affecting movies I have ever watched is Thank You for Smoking. It's about nearly 2 decades old, and it's around the spin doctoring on the issue of smoking. In fact, the opening scene, I think, is a television interview where the spin doctor employed by the tobacco industry is facing off with a child, no more than 10, who is suffering from the effects of secondary smoking and all the challenges that come with that, dying of cancer, essentially. And true to Hollywood, he does walk out of that having made the better argument. We all know the impact of smoking, at least we should. We know that it's not safe for our health, and we absolutely know the issue that it will have devastating consequences if you are particularly a heavy and a regular smoker. To talk us, I suppose, on the issues of smoking, particularly in the middle of Lung Cancer Awareness Month, I've got on Zoom with me this morning for the Wednesday panel, Dr. Sharon Nyatsanza, the Deputy Director of the National Council Against Smoking. Sharon, a very good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Alongside her, of course, is Professor Corne van Walbeek, who is the Director of the Research Unit on the Economics of Excisable Products at the University of Cape Town. Corne, lovely to have you here. Good morning.
Good morning, Africa.
And we've got Dr. Eddie Wolff, who's no stranger to this show. Eddie, lovely to see you. It's been a while and lovely to chat to you. Good morning.
Africa, lovely to see you and chat to you. Long time no speak, and this is wonderful.
Indeed. Let's start with the health impact, I suppose, of smoking. And Sharon, this is where I will bring you in. The National Council Against Smoking, obviously, the name of your organization, I suppose, expresses your bias, right? But let's highlight some of the perhaps often forgotten or disregarded health issues that come with smoking.
So thank you, Africa, for actually just, bringing attention to this important issue. So yes, many people know that smoking is harmful to health. Even the cigarette pack itself does tell you that smoking kills, smoking causes lung cancer. But we see currently in South Africa, for example, that 51% of the deaths are actually being linked to non-communicable diseases. And we know again that tobacco actually is the major risk factor for the 4 main NCDs. We're talking about lung, the cancers, we're talking about the heart diseases, we're talking about diabetes. It is still linked to that. So it's a major risk factor. But what people don't really sometimes also know is that tobacco, even though it doesn't cause the communicable diseases, it actually worsens the outcomes for most communicable diseases. So I'm talking about TB, I'm talking about HIV. If you are smoking and you're on ARVs, for example, you actually are also making them less effective. And we also obviously are just coming from the COVID-19 pandemic. We also found, that there's a lot of evidence which actually shows that smoking actually worsens the communicable diseases. So definitely smoking is bad for health. It basically, affects your immune system. And because of that, it actually affects almost every organ of your body. So it's really hard to kind of, tie down and, point out specifics, but it basically is just affecting all the organs of your body.
And Eddie, despite all of that information, which is generally widely known, we still have a significant number of South Africans lighting up every day.
Yeah, they actually do, Africa, and there's two issues at play here. Firstly, smoking is an addiction. The nicotine that you ingest is an addiction, with all the side effects that we just heard about. So there is an addiction, and the second one is the question of behavioral economics. Let me go to the addiction first. Addiction is that it causes the frontal part of the inside of the brain to act as a pleasure center. In other words, if you get nicotine into you, it acts as a kick. You feel better. Your mood immediately feels better. You feel nice. You feel elevated and you feel good. And after you've been smoking for a while, and it differs from person to person, that kick that you get, you want it all the time. And because it becomes a part of what you need, not to survive, but you actually need it to live and to have that kick and to feel good and to feel relaxed and to feel calm. Although nicotine does not relax you, but just gives you that elevated mood that causes you to like it and to smoke again. And then comes the second thing, but what if I know it can give me lung cancer or everything else that's been spoken of before? Then behavioral economics stepped in. Firstly, we minimize the addictive effect of nicotine. You say, oh, no, this, I can smoke less next week. I'm just going to have a couple of cigarettes right now just to feel a bit better. And I can stop smoking anytime I want to. Just as alcoholics can stop drinking anytime they want to. They don't have to go to a program to stop drinking. So people who have a problem with nicotine addiction, with smoking, their behavioral economics in their mind say, no, you can definitely stop tomorrow. You're not smoking that much. 20 a day isn't that much. And so we discount the negative effects by thinking that we can always alleviate the deleterious effects. Yes, I smoke, but I go to the gym. That's fine. Yes, I smoke, but I eat healthily. So that's fine. So in terms of behavioral economics, the kick takes over. The elevated mood takes over the deleterious consequences of ingesting nicotine. So we go for the immediate kick, the immediate mood elevation versus the long-term deleterious consequences to our bodies.
Let's bring in the financial economics, I suppose, and that's where I turn to you, Corne. We'll talk in a moment about the excisable portion to certainly tobacco products and how important it is to any treasury, I suppose, not only unique to South Africa. But let's talk about the negative impact of tobacco on the health and the welfare of South Africans and what impact that has on our GDP. Do we have such data? Number of days taken off, for example, because of illness. And this is a bugbear of mine. Anyone who's a smoker will get up from the table, go to the smoking area a number of times during the day. And someone like me who's not a smoker, I'm not allowed to enjoy the same privilege.
Yes, thanks very much, Africa. And there has, in fact, been quite a lot of research done on what is the economic impact of smoking on the economy. And a study that was published about a year or two ago indicates that in 2016, the cost of smoking, specifically in the form of health costs, but also in the form of reduced earnings by people who become ill and also reduced earnings by the people who have to care for those people, is in fact close to 1% of the GDP. Putting that in a number, it's about 42 billion rand. That's, of course, a huge number that most people don't fathom how big that number actually is. It's about 1% of the GDP. In contrast to that, the revenue that the government gets in the form of excise taxes at the moment is in the order of about 10 billion rand. If you compare that, in other words, to the cost, it means that this industry is imposing a very substantial net negative impact onto the economy. So also for just individuals, what we see and what the research has shown is that households that spend money on cigarettes, that money can't be spent on something else. And researchers have done the research and they've looked at household expenditure patterns of different groups of people, in other words, of smoking households and of non-smoking households. And they conclude that smoking households spend less on things that would typically be regarded as desirable. They spend less on food for their children. They spend less on education. They spend less on general health expenditures. So it's a case of that the tobacco is sucking up the budget for the tobacco and that other things are being left out in the process.
Panelists, we've got our first call for the half an hour. That is from Darren in Tokai. Maria, do you mind? Oh, there it is. Never mind. Darren, what's your comment for the panel on this topic? Good morning.
Hi, good morning. My father is currently dying of COPD, and it's quite a struggle to watch, obviously. But I was chatting with a pulmonologist in Constantiaberg, and we ended up sort of understanding that smoking, as we spoke about, or you spoke about, nicotine addiction. But smoking is addictive on so many levels. There's the nicotine addiction, of course, and then there's the physical addiction, something to do with your hands. You need to touch something, fiddle with something. Then there's the social addiction. You do it because other people around you do it, and you mimic their behavior, and you want to feel part of their community. So you collaborate all those together, and it becomes this monster like addiction that you can't really get rid of. I mean, he's been smoking for 55 years. It's crazy.
And the fact that he's been diagnosed with this illness, has that in any way changed his behavior as far as smoking is concerned?
You won't believe this, but no. He's still, I mean, on oxygen, still smokes.
Unbelievable. I'm sorry that you and your family are going through this, Darren. Thank you very much for your call. And Eddie, it speaks to the point you were making earlier, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I share so much with the previous caller. A part of my late father's dying was that he had emphysema, which is a smoking-related disease. He stopped smoking when he got emphysema, but that was too late then. And we need to understand that in the behavioral economics of smoking, one needs to stop before you get sick and not after you get sick. It's very important to realize that you are addicted and it's a disease and you need to stop.
Sharon, there's a proliferation of alternative smoking products using heat, for example, as a way of extracting the obviously nicotine and the tobacco influence without necessarily the burning of the tar and all of that everybody attributes to be the unhealthy elements. We don't have enough, certainly not enough longitudinal studies, I don't imagine, to be able to definitively say that it is actually safer for one to use vaping products over ordinary cigarettes, do we?
So we don't have the conclusive evidence that shows that these actually are safer, and for us to actually be referring people to use as a nation of cancer against smoking. But you're already raising something important. You talked about heated tobacco products. So you can think of your Glow or your IQOS, those are heated tobacco products. And you're also raising vapes, which are not tobacco products, but these actually are heating up a liquid with various ingredients. And currently, because of no control, we have no control on how much nicotine is in those products. We have no control over what ingredients actually are in those products. And we definitely do need to see regulations coming into place. So for heated tobacco, for example, we don't have evidence that they actually are actually leading to people having lesser harm risks at all at the moment. So these are all the complexities. And I think there's also been studies in South Africa which have been looking at, are they helping people to stop smoking completely? And studies from University of Pretoria, for example, are showing that they did help people in the short term, but in the long term, most of the participants actually went back to using the tobacco products, and they actually are seeing over 90% in that sample actually dual users. So they're using both the combustible and also the vaping products, and we know that is actually even more harmful to health. So these are the complexities that we're dealing with in South Africa, but we do need to regulate to ensure that we keep them out of reach of the kids, because most of smokers start smoking, 7 out of 10 start smoking as kids, and obviously that's when the addiction starts. We need to keep them out of reach. At the same time, we need to protect even the adult users as well, so that they have accurate information on what they're using as well.
I will tell you, the hazard of driving and vaping at the same time should be addressed, because once you blow out that smoke, it literally fills the entire cabin of your car. I don't know how people see beyond that smoke when they are driving, particularly when the light is not as bright outside. Our next call is from Claire in Gardens. Claire, good morning. What's your question or comment?
Morning, Africa, and morning to the panel. I'm just curious about the new legislation and sort of planning in New Zealand to phase out smoking. They have, I'm not entirely sure how long the plan is, but would be interested to hear from the panel if something like that would be possible in South Africa or is being looked at.
Corne, I'll give that question to you. Is it a possibility for us to see a phasing out of smoking as New Zealand is planning? Claire, thank you for your question.
So yes, thank you very much, Africa, and thanks, Claire, for that question. And just for a little bit of extra background to the listeners, basically what New Zealand is saying is people born beyond a certain year will never be allowed to smoke, even when they turn 18, even when they turn 21, or even when they turn any age. So this is part of a strategy in the tobacco control community called endgame strategies, where you specifically are trying to generate or create a smoke-free generation. So the smokers that were born, say, after 2010, or not smokers, the people born after 2010 will never be allowed to smoke. Of course, there will be some individuals, and to some extent, this is an aspirational thing. What's happening in places like New Zealand, Australia, the United Kingdom, some states in the US, is that there has been a significant decrease in smoking prevalence in these countries. The smoking prevalence in those countries is currently in the order of about 10%. In South Africa, it's in the order of 25%. Before we can get to that position, we need to do a lot of things. And one of the things that we need to do is to literally get down that smoking prevalence to a number that is small enough so that one can go for this so-called end game strategy. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we are not quite there yet. However, it is an aspirational thing that we need to do. At this moment in time, if I may, Africa, I also want to just address the issue of illicit trade. There are a lot of cigarettes being sold in South Africa where the price is 25 Rand or even less than 20 Rand. The excise tax at the moment on cigarettes is just shy of 20 Rand per pack of cigarettes. So any cigarettes that are bought at a price of 25 Rand or less, you can be fairly confident that they are illicit in the sense that the excise tax has not been paid. That is criminal. And there are unfortunately very, very many cigarettes, about half of cigarettes being sold in South Africa that are illicit. The South African Revenue Services have addressed this, or is trying to address this, and if you will recall, about 2 or 3 months ago, Gold Leaf Tobacco Corporation was placed under curatorship of the South African Revenue Services, specifically because of their very, very bad behavior during 2018, 2019. They didn't even look at 2020 when the sales ban was, and where Gold Leaf Tobacco was very, very much at the forefront of selling illicit cigarettes. So I would strongly encourage your smoking listeners, do not buy illicit cigarettes. It's ethically wrong, it's legally wrong, and also you are buying cigarettes that are really causing more harm and more pain. And they are also very much funded by the organized crime syndicates.
The topic of illicit cigarettes, I think, needs a panel discussion all on its own. 6 police officers arrested and charged in Mpumalanga, I think, on Friday. This was a multi-year investigation by various units within the SAPS. And what they did was to collude basically with customs officials and others and allowed for illicit tobacco to be transported through the Beitbridge border between South Africa and Zimbabwe. And that's something that needs to be done. Eddie, behavioral economics you've made reference to. How do we get that smoking prevalence at 25% down to an acceptable number like 10% they have in New Zealand?
I think, Africa, the best way to go about it is to use education, to use the media extensively, to show people how the lungs of a smoker looks. In other words, I know it's not right to scare people into submission, but we need to do something because the deleterious effects, as the other 2 people of the panel have said, is so bad that we are actually entitled to use very negative education to get people to stop before they die or before they contract the disease. We must change the balance in the scales of behavioral economics to the deleterious effects of smoking outweighing the kick effect that we get because we are addicted to the nicotine. And also realize that there are about 400 other chemicals in every puff that you take that would damage your health beyond repair. And that's the point, beyond repair. So we need to use education, the media, and every method at our disposal to bring to the attention of all people that is not done. But the most important thing, the role models, parents, and other people need not smoke because they set a bad example to those youngsters who now will also smoke because, look, my dad smokes and there's nothing wrong with him. You know, he's 35 years old and he's smoked all his life and he only looks like he's 89 years old. But he's still alive and he's doing well. So the role models must also realize that they play a significant role in getting people to smoke, and we can get them to reduce it for their children's sake and for other people's sake, youngsters' sake. We could reduce it, but my fear is it's going to take a fairly long time.
Indeed, I'm going to ask listeners to call me on 021 446 0567. Australia has done away with labels altogether as far as cigarette packages are concerned. And in fact, up to 80% of the face of that packet of cigarettes you buy is often a very graphic representation of what will happen to your lungs, to your teeth, to whatever other health ailment that might be caused by smoking. Would that be a deterrent? What else do you think we need to do to bring that prevalence of smoking down to 10%? Let me say thank you very much to my panel for your time and for your insights this morning. This is a topic that could go on for another few more hours, no doubt. The Deputy Director of the National Council Against Smoking, Dr. Sharon Nyatsanza, Dr. Eddie Wolff, and of course Professor Corne van Walbeek, who's the Director of the Research Unit on the Economics of Excisable Products at the University of Cape Town. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Have yourself a wonderful Wednesday. And as indicated, we continue this conversation on 021 446 0567. What will it take for us to reduce that number of people who are smoking and smoking regularly in South Africa?